The quiet Mercy emerged from hyperspace at the edge of human-controlled territory, and Sethris felt tears forming in her eyes as she saw the welcoming lights of a space station in the distance. "That is Haven Station," Yuna explained, standing beside her at the viewport. "It is a refugee processing center where you and Mira can get medical care, food, housing, and whatever else you need." Sethris shook her head in disbelief. "You take in refugees and give them these things?" she asked. "What do they have to do in return?" "Nothing," Yuna replied. "They just have to accept the help." Myra was standing between them, holding her mother's hand with one small fist while clutching a toy that Jisoo had made for her from spare parts. Little girl had changed dramatically in just a few days since their rescue. Her skin returning to its natural healthy blue, and her eyes regaining some of the sparkle that trauma had stolen. "Will there be other children there?" Myra asked in a small voice. It was one of the first complete sentences she had spoken since the rescue. And Sethris felt her heart swell with gratitude for these humans who had helped her daughter begin to heal. "Yes, little one," Yuna said with a warm smile. "There are many children on Haven Station, and schools where you can learn, and playgrounds where you can run and laugh." The docking procedures took only a few minutes, and then the crew of the Quiet Mercy was escorting Sethris and Myra through the station's busy corridor. Sethris was overwhelmed by what she saw. Aliens of dozens of different species walked freely through the station, some wearing the simple clothes of refugees and others wearing the uniforms of station personnel. And everywhere she looked, she saw evidence of the humans. Impossible compassion. A medical team was treating a wounded Krillix. Merchant, without asking for payment food, was being distributed to a group of displaced families with no questions asked. Children were playing together regardless of species, while their parents watched with tired but hopeful expressions. "How do you afford all of this?" Sethris asked Yuna. "The cost must be enormous." "It is," Yuna admitted, "but humans believe that some things are worth more than money." They reached the registration desk, where a kind-faced woman named Director Hannah Jang welcomed them with genuine warmth. "Captain Park has told me about your situation," she said to Sethris. "You and your daughter are welcome here for as long as you need." She handed Sethris a datapad containing information about housing assignments, medical appointments, and educational opportunities. "When you are ready, we can also discuss employment options." The director continued. "Captain Park mentioned that you have tactical experience, and we are always looking for skilled personnel to help protect our convoys." Sethris looked at Yuna with surprise. "You recommended me for a job?" Yuna shrugged. "You said you wanted to help people." She replied. This seemed like a good way to do that. The following weeks were a blur of recovery and adjustment. Thris and Myra were given a small but comfortable apartment on the station, and they slowly began to build a new life among these strange, compassionate humans. Myra started attending school and quickly made friends with children of a dozen different species, her natural curiosity emerging now that she finally felt safe. Sethris underwent therapy for the trauma she had experienced and gradually began to process the grief she had been carrying since her colony burned, and when she was ready, she accepted the position that had been offered to her 6 months after her rescue. Sethris stood on the bridge of a human patrol vessel called the Guardian Shield, serving as the tactical advisor for a convoy protection mission. Contact detected, the sensor officer reported. 3 vessels approaching on intercept trajectory. The Frimigant convoy they were protecting consisted of 5 transport ships carrying refugees from a recently attacked colony, and Sethris felt a personal connection to every life on board those vessels. Configuration? She asked calmly. 2 attack craft and 1 transport, bearing Keth Syndicate markings. Sethris studied the tactical display and immediately recognized the pattern. "They are using a pincer formation," she announced. "The attack craft will try to disable our engines while the transport moves in to capture survivors." She turned to Captain Saijun Ma. the human commander of the Guardian Shield. If we break formation and engage the attack craft directly, we can disrupt their timing and give the convoy time to jump to safety. Captain May nodded with confidence in his tactical advisor. Do it, he ordered. The battle was brief but intense, and Sethris felt something powerful as she watched the Keth slavers retreat in confusion. She was no longer a victim, she was a protector. After the convoy reached safety and the Guardian Shield returned to Haven Station, Sethris found Myra waiting for her at the docking bay. "Mommy, you saved people today," the little girl said with obvious pride. Sethris knelt down and embraced her daughter. "I did," she confirmed. "Just like the humans saved us." That night, as she tucked Mira into bed in their small apartment, her daughter asked a question that made Sethris pause. "Mommy, why are humans so nice?" Sethris thought about everything she had experienced since that desperate day when she had offered herself to strangers just to feed her child because they choose to be. She finally answered, "They wake up every day and decide that helping others is more important than helping themselves." She brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "And that choice is something we can make too," she said. "We can choose to be kind. We can choose to help those who need us. And we can choose to carry the light that humans showed us." Myra nodded sleepily. "I want to be like them when I grow up," she murmured. "Then you will be," Sethris promised. "You will be wonderful." She kissed her daughter goodnight and walked to the window of their apartment. Looking out at the stars, somewhere in that vast darkness, a salvage ship called the Quiet Mercy was still flying, still searching for people in need, still carrying that impossible human compassion to every corner of the galaxy. Sethris, at once, believed that the universe was nothing but cruelty and survival. She had once believed that kindness was weakness and that hope was for fools. But humans had shown her a different truth. They had shown her that compassion could be the strongest force in the galaxy, that choosing to help others could change everything, and that even in the darkest places there could be light. When she had pleaded with those strangers in that abandoned station, offering everything she had just to feed her child, she had expected to lose herself instead. She had found a family, she had found a purpose, and she had found something she had thought was gone forever. She had found hope, and now it was her turn to share that hope with others, to pay forward the kindness that had been given to her, to prove that the humans were right all along. The galaxy could be changed, one act of compassion at a time, and Sethris was ready to be part of that change. The weapon's fire was deafening in the confined space of the storage area, and Yuna pressed her back against a cargo container while energy bolts screamed past her head. Jisoo crouched nearby, her medical training forgotten as she returned fire at the Keth. Soldiers pouring through the doorway. "There are too many of them," Jisoo shouted over the noise. "We cannot hold this position for long." Yuna knew her crew member was right, but she also knew that Dowan needed more time to get Sethris and Myra to the ship. "Just a few more minutes," she called back. "Keep them pinned down." She leaned around the container and fired 3 quick shots that forced the Keth to take cover. And in that moment she saw exactly how outnumbered they were. At least 10 soldiers were already in the room, with more arriving every second. And their armor was heavier than anything Yuna's small weapon could penetrate. One of the Keth raised something that looked like a grenade, and Yuna's heart stopped because she knew what was about to happen. "Move!" She screamed at Jisoo. They both dove away from their cover, just as the explosive device landed where they had been hiding, and the blast sent them tumbling across the floor in a shower of debris. Yuna's ears were ringing as she struggled to her feet, and she saw Jisoo lying motionless a few meters away. "No," she whispered, scrambling toward her crew member on hands and knees. But Jisoo was already moving, pushing herself up with a groan and shaking her head to clear the dizziness. "I'm okay," she said, though blood was running down the side of her face from a cut above her eye. "Just got my bell rung." The Keth were advancing now, confident that the explosion had disabled their enemies. And Yuna raised her weapon with trembling hands. She was prepared to fight to the end. But she knew the math was not in their favor. Then something unexpected happened. A figure emerged from the corridor behind the Keth, moving fast and low, and before any of the soldiers could react. Two of them fell with precise shots to the gaps in their armor. Sethris stood among the chaos with a weapon she had taken from somewhere, her silver eyes blazing with a fire that Yuna had not seen before. "Did you think I would just run away?" the Valorian woman called out as she ducked behind cover. "I was a tactical officer in my colony's defense force before. I was a refugee." The Keth were confused by this attack from behind, and their momentary hesitation gave Yuna the opening she needed. "Jisoo with me," she commanded. "We push forward now while they are distracted." The three women fought together through the storage area, covering each other with the coordination of soldiers who had trained for years. Even though they had known each other for less than an hour, Sethris moved differently now. No longer the broken, starving mother begging for scraps, but a warrior remembering who she had been before tragedy had stripped everything away. "This way," Sethris said, pointing to a side passage. "It connects to the docking level through an emergency shaft." They ran through the passage with the Keth close behind, and Jisoo stumbled as her injury began to affect her balance. Yuna grabbed her arm and pulled her along, refusing to slow down. "Almost there," she encouraged. "Just keep moving." They reached the emergency shaft and began climbing. Sethris first, then Jisoo, then Yuna bringing up the rear below them. The Keth reached the shaft and began firing upward, and one of the energy bolts grazed Yunji's leg as she pulled herself onto the next level. She cried out in pain but kept climbing, gritting her teeth against the burning sensation spreading through her limb. "Yunji is hit," Jisoo reported through the communicator. "We need medical attention as soon as we reach the ship." Dohwan's voice came back immediately. "I have the engines running, and Myra is secured," he said. "Get here now, because I'm not leaving without all of you." They emerged from the shaft onto the docking level, and Yuna could see the quiet Mercy waiting for them just 50 meters away. It was the most beautiful sight she had ever seen, but between them and the ship stood 5 more Keth soldiers. And these ones were not going to be surprised by an attack from behind. "Surrender now," the lead soldier commanded in a harsh mechanical voice. "You cannot escape, and resistance will only bring more pain." Yuna positioned herself in front of Jisoo and Sethris, shielding them with her body. "Let my people go," she said. "I will stay as your prisoner if you let them leave safely." The Keth soldier made a sound that might have been laughter. "You are not in a position to negotiate." "Human," he said, "we will take all of you, and the Valorian female will bring a good price at the markets." Sethris stepped forward despite Yuna's attempt to hold her back. "You will not touch my daughter," she said, her voice cold as the void of space. "The child is on your ship," the soldier observed. "Once we kill you, we will simply take the ship and the child together." Yuna felt rage building in her chest, a fury at the casual cruelty of these beings who saw living people as nothing more than merchandise. "You talk about taking and selling people like they are objects," she said. "Do you ever wonder if there is something wrong with that?" The Keth soldier tilted his head in genuine confusion. "Wrong?" he repeated. "There is no wrong or right. There is only power and weakness. And the powerful take what they want from the weak. That is where you are mistaken," Yuna replied. "Because humans do not believe that, and we never will." She raised her weapon knowing she could not win this fight, but refusing to surrender. Sethris stood beside her with the same determination in her silver eyes, and then the wall behind the Keth soldiers exploded inward as the quiet Mercy opened fire with its external weapons. Dowan's voice crackled through the communicator. "I got tired of waiting," he said. "Now get on the ship before more of them show up." The Keth soldiers were scattered by the blast, and Yuna did not hesitate. She grabbed Jisoo and ran for the ship's open airlock with Sethris. Right behind her, they tumbled through the doorway, and the airlock sealed behind them. Immediately, everyone hold on, Do-hwan announced. We are leaving now. The ship lurched as it pulled away from the station, and Yuna felt the familiar vibration of the engines, pushing them toward freedom. She lay on the floor of the airlock, catching her breath, and she felt a hand on her shoulder. Sethris was looking down at her with tears streaming from her silver eyes. You came back for me, the Valorian woman whispered. I told you to run, and you came back. Yuna managed a tired smile. I told you, she said. We do not leave people behind. Sethris helped her stand, and together they made their way to the bridge, where Do-hwan was piloting them away from the station at maximum speed. Little Myra was strapped into a passenger seat, and when she saw her mother, she began to cry with relief. Stories ran to her daughter and held her tight, and the sound of their combined sobbing filled the bridge with raw emotion. Yuna watched them for a moment before turning to check on Jisoo. How bad is the leg? She asked. Jisoo was already treating the wound with supplies from her kit. It will heal, she said. I have had worse. On the view screen, the Keth ships were moving to pursue them, but the Quiet Mercy had a head start. Can we outrun them? Yuna asked. Do-hwan, her engineer, gave her a confident nod. This old girl is faster than she looks, he said. We will be in hyperspace before they can catch us. Yuna allowed herself to relax just a little. They had done it. They had saved 2 lives today. Not because there was profit in it, not because anyone was watching, but simply because it was the right thing to do to Yuna. That mattered more than anything else in the galaxy. The Quiet Mercy had been traveling through hyperspace for 6 hours when Sethris finally allowed herself to believe that they might actually survive. She sat in the small common area of the ship, with Mira sleeping peacefully in her lap, and she watched the humans go about their business with a mixture of wonder and confusion. Jisoo was treating her own wound with the casual efficiency of someone who had done this many times before, while Do-hwan ran diagnostics on the ship's systems, and Yoonji monitored their course from the navigation station. Despite the bandage wrapped around her injured leg, Captain Yuna approached Sethris with 2 cups of something warm and offered one to the Valorian woman. It is called tea, Yuna explained as she sat down nearby. Humans drink it when we need comfort or when we want to think clearly. Sethris accepted the cup and inhaled the unfamiliar aroma, finding it strangely soothing. Thank you, she said softly. For this and for everything else. Yuna shook her head. You do not need to thank us, she replied. We did what anyone should do. But that is exactly what I do not understand, Sethris said. And the confusion she had been carrying finally spilled out in her words. I have lived for 37 cycles, she continued. I have traveled to dozens of worlds and met hundreds of different species. And in all that time, I have never encountered anyone like you humans. She looked down at her sleeping daughter. When I offered myself to you in that storage room, I knew exactly what to expect, she admitted. I expected you to use me and then decide whether feeding Myra was worth the cost of a ration bar. Her voice grew thick with old pain. That is how the galaxy works, she said. The strong take what they want, and the weak learn to survive by offering what little they have. Yuna listened without interrupting, her expression thoughtful. But you did not take, Sethris continued. You gave without asking, and then you fought for us. And your crew member was injured protecting people she had never met before. She met Yuna's eyes with an intensity that surprised them both. Why? She asked. What makes humans different from everyone else? Yuna was silent for a long moment, gathering her thoughts. I cannot speak for all humans, she finally said. We are not a perfect species, and our history is full of cruelty and violence and selfishness. She took a sip of her tea, but somewhere along the way, we developed this idea that compassion is strength, and that helping others makes us better, not weaker. She gestured at her crew. We teach our children that a stranger in need deserves kindness. And we tell stories about heroes who sacrifice for others. And we believe that the measure of a person is how they treat those who cannot help them in return. Sethris considered this carefully. Your culture chooses to be this way? She asked. Yes, Yuna confirmed. It is a choice we make every day, and sometimes we fail. But we keep trying because we believe it matters. Mira stirred in her sleep, and Sethris automatically adjusted her hold to keep the child comfortable. I was a tactical officer, Sethris said quietly. I spent years learning how to fight and how to analyze threats. But I never learned how to hope. She looked at Yuna with new understanding in her silver eyes. You have given me something I thought I had lost forever, she said. You have shown me that there are people in this galaxy who choose to be good. Before Yuna could respond, the communication system crackled to life with an incoming transmission. Salvage vessel Quiet Mercy. A harsh voice demanded. This is Commander Vectis of the Kef Syndicate, and you will respond immediately. Everyone on the bridge tensed, and Doan quickly checked their position. They cannot catch us in hyperspace, he reported. This is just a communication signal, probably trying to intimidate us. Yuna stood and straightened her jacket. Put him on screen. She ordered. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a Kef commander with the distinctive gray skin and multiple eyes of his species. You have something that belongs to the Syndicate, Commander Vectis said without preamble. The Valorian female and her offspring are our property, and you will surrender them immediately. Yuna's expression did not change. They are not property, she said calmly. They are people, and they are under my protection. The commander made a sound of disgust. You humans and your ridiculous sentimentality, he sneered. What could these refugees possibly offer you that makes them worth dying for? Nothing, Yuna replied. They offer us nothing, and we are helping them anyway. Vectis paused as if trying to process information that did not fit his understanding. That is illogical, he said. Every action should have a purpose. Every risk should have a reward. And you are risking your ship and your crew for beings who have no value. Yuna smiled slightly. That is where we disagree, she said. We believe that every life has value, and that helping someone in need is its own reward. Then you are fools, the commander declared. And fools do not survive long in this galaxy. Perhaps, Yuna acknowledged, but we will die being who we choose to be. And that is more important to us than survival. Sethris watched this exchange with growing amazement. Seeing a human woman stand before a ruthless slaver and refuse to bend. You cannot run forever, Vectis warned. The Syndicate has resources throughout the sector, and we will find you eventually. Then we will keep running, Yuna replied. And we will keep helping people like Sethris and Mira. And there is nothing you can do to stop us. The commander's multiple eyes narrowed with something that might have been grudging respect. You are either very brave or very stupid, he said. Why not both? Yuna answered with a slight smile. She cut the transmission before Vectis could respond. The bridge was silent for a moment. And then Doan laughed out loud. Captain, you just told off a Keth commander, he said with obvious admiration. Someone needed to, Yuna replied. Now let us focus on getting to human space before his friends find us. Sethris stood up carefully so as not to wake Myra and approached Yuna. You meant what you said, she observed. You really believe that helping strangers is worth risking your lives? I do, Yuna confirmed. Then I have a confession to make, Sethris said. I have not been completely honest with you about who I am. The humans looked at her with curiosity rather than suspicion. I was not just a tactical officer, Sethris admitted. I was the chief of colonial defense for Velarus 7, responsible for protecting 30,000 people. She paused. and pain flickered across her face when the Keth came. "I failed them," she said. "I could not save my people. And I have been carrying that guilt ever since." Una placed a hand on her shoulder. "You saved your daughter," she said gently. "And that is not nothing. But I can do more," Sethris replied with sudden determination. "I know Keth tactics and patrol patterns. I know their weaknesses and blind spots. And I can help you avoid them." She looked around at the crew. "If you will let me. I want to help you the way you helped me," she said. "Not because I owe you, but because I finally remember what it feels like to want to do good." Una looked at her crew and saw agreement in their faces. "Welcome to the Quiet Mercy," she said. "We could use a tactical expert for the first time since her colony burned." Sethris smiled. She had lost everything she once had. But these strange, compassionate humans had helped her find something new. She had found hope. She had found purpose, and she had found a reason to keep fighting. The galaxy might be dark and cruel, but Sethris was beginning to understand that humans carried their own light wherever they went, and maybe, just maybe, she could learn to carry some of that light too. The distress signal had been repeating for 3 days when the human salvage ship Quiet Mercy finally arrived at the abandoned training station. Captain Una Park stood at the bridge window and studied the structure floating in the darkness of space. And she felt something wrong in her gut, something that told her this was not a simple salvage job. Life signs? She asked her navigation officer Runji Lim, checked her instruments twice before answering, and her voice carried confusion when she spoke. "One adult and one child. Captain, both very faint. Located in the lower storage levels." Una frowned at this information because abandoned stations did not usually have survivors, and survivors did not usually hide in storage areas unless they were afraid of something. "Dohan, bring weapons," she ordered her engineer. "Jizu, bring your medical kit. And everyone stay alert because I do not like the look of this place." The boarding team moved through the station corridors with careful steps, and what they found made Una's stomach turned with anger. Scorch marks covered the walls in patterns that spoke of weapons fire, and broken furniture lay scattered across the floors like bodies after a battle, and the smell of burned metal hung in the recycled air. "Slavers," Dawan said quietly, recognizing the signs from years of experience in the outer systems. "They hit this place maybe a week ago and took everyone they could find." Jizu pointed to a dark stain on the floor that none of them wanted to identify, and she whispered a prayer under her breath for whoever had fallen there. They continued deeper into the station, following the faint life signs on their scanners, and with each step, Una felt her determination grow stronger. She had seen what slavers did to their victims, and she had sworn long ago that she would never turn away from someone in need. The storage level was dark and cold, with most of the power systems dead or dying, and the team used flashlights to navigate between towering shelves of abandoned Cardonji. Stopped suddenly and held up her hand for silence, and everyone heard it at the same time, a small sound, like a child trying not to cry, coming from behind a stack of sealed containers. Sienna moved forward alone, keeping her weapon lowered and her hands visible, and she spoke in the gentlest voice she could manage. "We are not here to hurt you," she said into the darkness. "We heard your distress signal and came to help." For a long moment, nothing happened, and then a figure emerged from the shadows, and Una felt her heart break at the sight. The alien woman was Valorian, tall and slender, with pale blue skin and silver eyes that reflected the flashlight beams like mirrors. And she had clearly been beautiful once before. Hunger and fear had carved her face into sharp angles. She was thin in a way that spoke of many days without food, and her clothes were torn and stained, and she held herself like someone expecting to be struck at any moment. But what struck Una most was how the woman positioned her body, standing in front of something behind her, protecting it with everything she had left. "Please," the Valorian woman said, and her voice cracked from lack of use. "Please, I know what you want. and I will give it to you without resistance." She stepped forward and spread her arms in a gesture of surrender that made Yuna's crew shift uncomfortably. "Use me, if you must," the woman continued, and tears began to fall from her silver eyes. "Do whatever you want with me, but please, I beg you, just feed my child." She moved aside to reveal a small girl, perhaps 5 or 6 years old by human standards, huddled against the wall with her knees pulled to her chest. The child was even thinner than her mother, with the same blue skin now turned gray from malnutrition, and she stared at the humans with eyes that had seen too much suffering for someone so young. Yuna felt something twist inside her chest, a mixture of sorrow and rage that threatened to overflow. And she had to take a breath before she could respond. She slowly lowered herself to her knees, making herself smaller and less threatening, and she reached into her jacket pocket. The Valorian woman tensed, expecting a weapon, but what Yuna pulled out was a simple ration bar, wrapped in silver foil. She held it toward the child with an open hand and a gentle smile. "Here," Yuna said softly. "This is for you, little one, and there is more on our ship if you are still hungry." The woman stared at Yuna with complete confusion written across her face, as if the human had suddenly started speaking in an unknown language. "I do not understand," she said slowly. "What is your price for this food?" Yuna shook her head firmly and kept her hand extended toward the child. "There is no price," she said. "You needed help, so we are helping, and that is all there is to it." The woman's legs gave out beneath her, and she collapsed to her knees on the cold metal floor, and the sound of her sobbing filled the storage room. "That is not how the galaxy works," she whispered through her tears. "Everyone takes what they can. Everyone has a price. No one helps strangers without wanting something in return." Jisoo moved forward with her medical kit already open, and she knelt beside the woman with the same gentleness that Yuna had shown. "My name is Jisoo," she said, "and I am going to check your health now, if that is acceptable to you." The little girl finally moved, reaching out with trembling hands to take the ration bar from Yuna, and she looked at her mother for permission before taking her first bite. "I am Sethris," the woman said between sobs, "and my daughter is called Myra, and we have been hiding here for 9 days since I escaped from the slaver ship." Yuna reached out and placed her hand on Sethris's shoulder, and she made a promise in that moment that she intended to keep. "You are safe now," she said. "We are going to take you somewhere warm and give you food and medicine, and no one is going to hurt you or your daughter ever again." Sethris looked up at Yuna with something new in her silver eyes, something that might have been the first spark of hope she had felt in a very long time. Before she could respond, Yoonji's communicator crackled with urgent static, and her voice came through with obvious alarm. "Captain, we have a serious problem," she reported from the ship. "Multiple vessels just dropped out of hyperspace, and they are broadcasting Keth Syndicate identification codes." Yuna's jaw tightened because she knew that name very well, and she knew that the Keth were the most brutal slavers operating in this sector of space. "How many ships?" she asked, already calculating their options for escape. 4 armed vessels," Yoonji answered, "and they are moving to surround the station." Yuna looked at Sethris and Mira, at the desperate mother and the starving child, who had just begun to believe that help had finally arrived. And she made her decision without hesitation. "Everyone back to the ship," she commanded. "And we are taking our new friends with us because we are not leaving anyone behind." Sethris stared at her with disbelief as Dohan scooped up little Myra in his strong arms. "You would risk your lives for us?" she asked in a voice barely above a whisper. "You do not even know us." Yuna helped Sethris to her feet and supported her weight as they began moving toward the exit. "We know enough," she said firmly. "Now let us get out of here before things get worse." The slavers had returned, and they had the station surrounded. But Yuna refused to let fear change her decision. She had promised safety to a mother and child, and she would keep that promise or die trying. The corridors of the abandoned station felt different now, darker and more threatening. As the crew of the Quiet Mercy hurried toward their ship, with two unexpected passengers, Yuna kept her arm around Sethris, helping the weakened Valorian woman move faster than her starved body wanted to allow, while Dowan carried little Myra against his chest like she was made of precious glass. "How far to the docking bay?" Sethris asked between labored breaths. 3 levels up and about 200 meters, Yuna answered. "But we cannot go directly because the Keth will expect us to run straight for our ship." She activated her communicator and spoke quickly to Yunji. "Change of plans," she said. "We are going to take the maintenance tunnels to Section 7 and loop around to the secondary docking entrance." "Understood, Captain," Yunji responded. "But you should know that the Keth have already sent boarding parties, and I am tracking at least 15 hostiles entering through the main cargo doors." Dowan muttered something under his breath that was probably a curse, and Jisoo tightened her grip on her medical kit. Sethris looked at the humans with growing confusion because nothing they were doing made sense to her. "Why are you doing this?" she asked Yuna as they ducked into a narrow maintenance corridor. "You have a ship, and you could leave right now before the Keth block your escape." "We could," Yuna admitted without slowing down. "Then why do you stay and risk everything for strangers who can offer you nothing in return?" Yuna glanced back at the Valorian woman with an expression that Sethris could not interpret. "Because leaving you behind is not something we are willing to do," she said simply. "Now save your breath for moving." They traveled through the maintenance tunnels in tense silence, listening for any sign that the Keth had discovered their route. And Sethris used this time to observe the humans more closely. She noticed how Dowan adjusted his grip on Mira to keep her comfortable, even though it made carrying her more difficult. And she saw how Jisoo kept looking back to make sure Sethris was keeping up. And she watched how Yuna led from the front while constantly checking on everyone behind her. These behaviors confused Sethris because they did not fit any pattern she understood in her experience. Survival meant looking out for yourself first and others only when convenient. And yet these humans seemed to put the group above themselves as naturally as breathing. "We need to stop for a moment," Jisoo announced when they reached a junction in the tunnels. "Sethris is about to collapse, and Myra needs water." Yuna nodded and signaled for everyone to rest. And she pulled out another ration bar that she broke into pieces and shared among the group. Sethris watched in amazement as the humans gave larger portions to her and Mira without any discussion or argument, as if this was simply the normal thing to do. "Where did you come from?" Yuna asked gently while Sethris ate. "What happened to you before we found you?" Sethris was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke her voice was heavy with grief. "My colony was on Veloris 7. She began. We were farmers and traders. Peaceful people who wanted nothing more than to raise our children and live our lives." She paused to look at Mira, who had fallen asleep in Dowan's arms, exhausted from the first full meal she had eaten in days. "The Keth came without warning," Sethris continued. "They killed my mate when he tried to protect us, and they burned our home and took everyone they could capture." Jisoo made a soft sound of sympathy, and even Dohan's hard expression softened with sorrow. "I was put on a transport ship with 40 others," Sethris said, "but I could not let them take Mira to wherever they were going. So I found a way to escape when we stopped at this station for repairs." "You escaped from a slaver ship with a young child?" Yuna asked with obvious respect in her voice. "I had no choice," Sethris replied. "A mother does what she must for her child." She looked at Yuna with eyes that still held confusion despite everything. "But I do not understand you humans," she admitted. "I have met many species in my life, and all of them follow the same rules. That the strong take from the weak, and that help always comes with strings attached." She gestured at the group around her. "Yet you share your food without being asked, and you risk your lives for people who cannot repay you. And you treat my daughter with kindness, even though she means nothing to you. Una sat down next to Sethris and was quiet for a moment before answering, "Humans are not perfect," she said honestly. "We have done terrible things throughout our history, and we are capable of great cruelty when we choose to be." She looked at her crew with obvious affection. "But we also choose to be kind. And we teach our children that helping others is important. And we believe that a stranger in need deserves the same care we would want for ourselves." "But why?" Sethris pressed. "What do you gain from this belief?" Una smiled softly. "We gain the knowledge that we are the kind of people who help," she said. "And sometimes that is enough." Before Seth responded, Yunji's voice crackled through the communicator with urgent news. "Captain, the Keth are getting closer," she reported. "They have figured out that you are not heading straight for the ship, and they are spreading out to search the maintenance tunnels." Una stood immediately and helped Sethris to her feet. "How much time do we have?" "Maybe 10 minutes before they find your section." Dowan shifted Mira to a more secure position and checked his weapon. "Ben, we need to move now," he said. The group hurried through the tunnels again. And Sethris pushed herself to move faster despite her exhaustion, because she refused to be the reason these strange kind humans got caught. She did not understand them, but she was beginning to feel something she had not felt since her colony burned. She was beginning to hope. They reached a sealed door that led to the section near the docking bay, and Dohan quickly worked to override the lock while the others watched the corridor behind them. "Almost there," he muttered as his fingers flew across the control panel. A sound echoed through the tunnel, the unmistakable rhythm of boots on metal, and everyone knew what it meant. "They found us," Jisoo whispered. The door finally opened with a soft hiss, and Una pushed everyone through. Before following last, they emerged into a storage area just one level below the docking bay, and Una could see the airlock that led to their ship through a window on the far wall. "We are so close," she said. "Just a little further." Sethris grabbed Una's arm and spoke with desperate intensity. "Let me surrender to them," she begged. "Take Mira and go, and I will buy you time by giving myself up." Una's response was immediate and fierce. "That is not going to happen," she said firmly. "We all leave together, or we do not leave at all." Sethris stared at her with something that might have been wonder. "You barely know me," she whispered. "I know enough," Una repeated. "I know that you are a mother who loves her daughter, and I know that you deserve better than what the galaxy has given you. And I know that I am not going to abandon you." The sound of the Keth grew louder, closer, and Una made a decision. "Doan, take Sethris and Mira to the ship and get the engines ready," she commanded. "Jisoo and I will hold them here." "Captain." Doan started to protest. "That is an order," Una interrupted. "Now go." Sethris looked back as Dohan guided her toward the docking bay, and she saw Una and Jisoo taking positions behind cargo containers with their weapons. Raised, these humans were prepared to fight and possibly die for someone they had met less than an hour ago. Sethris did not understand it, but in that moment she made a silent promise. If she survived this day, she would find a way to repay their kindness. Not because they expected it, but because they deserved it. The first Keth soldiers appeared in the doorway, and the sound of weapons fire filled the air.